Welcome into today's show. I'm joined by Mr. Waylon Weatherford. He's out of Winder, Georgia. He's the pitmaster of Zips Barbecue, a solo cooker. And as a reminder, we are powered by Hound Hogs Barbecue Supply. Check them out at Hound Hogs BBQ Supply on Facebook and Instagram, and their website, houndhogsbbqsupply.com. Mr. Waylon, thank you for joining us, sir. Welcome.
Hey, glad to be here, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
So let's see. The first time I don't know if we met officially, but we cooked next to one another in May of last year. We were down at the Boss Hog. I was between. We were sandwiched between the Rec Tech boys, Jody and Chef Greg, and Zips Barbecue. So
that's right.
Recently ran into or had the chance to chat with Waylon, who was teaching the pork category at the GBC Cook School, and said, hey, let's get you on the show. So here we are. So a lot of folks might be wondering, where the heck is Winder, Georgia? Give you an idea. It's basically between Athens and Atlanta, somewhere in that area.
Right.
So anyway, so tell us, Waylon, what got you started into this crazy journey, this crazy thing that we call competition barbecue?
Well, I wish I had an exciting story like I, grew up cooking whole hogs or something, but we really didn't. My family didn't barbecue a lot, but I've been in the telecommunications business for about 25 years. And about 10 years ago, maybe it may have been 15 years ago, I got one of those little bullet smokers, kind of like a Weber Smoky Mountain knockoff for a service anniversary present. I started barbecuing at home. And then about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, I saw Barbecue Pitmasters. I know that's probably a familiar story, and had no idea that was even a thing, right? So I had a tailgate buddy that was interested in it, and I said, hey, we should try doing a couple competitions. And so we started 2016, 2017. We cooked backyard and maybe just did 2 a year. So that's kind of how I got started, and I've been cooking pro for the last 2 years.
So there it is. You start humble beginnings, right? Humble beginnings with a knockoff bullet smoker, and now next thing you know, you're teaching the pork category at the GBC Cook School. So, with pork is often regarded as one of the hardest categories, mainly because I think that there's just so many different muscles in there, and there's so many different ways you can mess it up.
Right.
Where have you been able to find success there where a lot of others really struggle in that category?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kurt. I think once I, watched videos online, and really when I converted to cooking on the drums and just started focusing on the money muscle and the bacon, so really broken it down, breaking the pork butt down to around 4.5 pounds, and really just focusing on that specific part. For some reason, cooking on the drum just really resonates with me, because you're constantly looking at it, you're constantly feeling of it, you're in there rotating the grates, that kind of thing, and I just have a good feel for cooking on those things, man. And it just made it easier for me.
You bring up a great point that oftentimes gets overlooked, and that is, we can give out the best pitmaster recipes and techniques the world's ever seen. They could be secrets, whatever they may be. We could give you everything. But at the end of the day, you and I both know, along with other teams, that really you win and lose in the last 10 or 15 minutes prior to turn in. And I think that's
exactly right. I had somebody really smart tell me, because I was a little bit worried about, doing the cook school and handing out all the recipes and all that good stuff. And somebody said, well, recipes are a dime a dozen. They still got to go cook it. Yep. And learning the right texture of that money muscle and what you're putting in that box is really the key to scoring.
That's exactly right. I think you maintain that consistency, and clearly, what the formula you found has worked. I know you won the Papa Joe's Banjo-BQ. You were the GC. What's your track record look like? How many GCs and RGCs do you have under your belt at this point?
In pro, just the one GC. I've had several top 10s over the 2 years. And we probably won 6 or 7 backyard grands, and we won the GBC Team of the Year in 2019 in backyard. I think we cooked 6 competitions that year, and I think won 4 of them.
And that's the great thing. I want to just, pause for a second, talk about the GBC. Great organization. It's a nonprofit based up in the North Georgia area, and they really promote all things barbecue. And for those folks that can't go cook 40 or 45 competitions a year, it's nice to be able to stay within your state or maybe neighboring state and still have some, still compete for the state points race. And I think that's a great thing. And here you are, you cooked 6 contests and you won the whole thing backyard,
Yeah.
in 2019, which I think is a great way to kind of get that competitive juices flowing and get teams more interested. You also said something that I thought was really good, and that is, you just have a feel for it. And there's really no substitute for that, right? You can watch a million different videos on YouTube and take as many classes as you want, but
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
not in there doing it, you got to sometimes use your senses, use the senses that we were given, right? So
Exactly.
I think we sometimes, especially now with technology, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all these different thermometers and schedules and timelines, I think sometimes we kind of lose sight of that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be the first to admit it. There's been several times where I've absolutely burned the heck out of ribs or chicken or whatever because I was just following, internal temp, or I was following a timeline, and I wasn't, I was taking the lazy approach. I wasn't
Yeah.
looking at it. And so I think to your point, that's a great reminder. At the end of the day, you got to cook, and you got to cook a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really, I think, what separates, the good from the great.
Absolutely.
So now pork is your bread and butter. Pork is, that's your from a score standpoint, that's your best category. What's your favorite category to cook?
I think brisket because it's, I'm pretty sure everybody says that it's the most challenging, right? And a
It
little
is.
bit of luck involved with it too. Getting that tenderness right every time is really hard. And then getting the judges to agree with you is even harder. But I'd say brisket would definitely be my favorite category to cook.
We do hear that quite a bit. It's actually my favorite as well for the very reason you mentioned. It is challenging. It's one thing I have taken a step back and looked at is how, if whether or not I'm going to continue to use the brisket caddy. I just,
Right.
for whatever reason, maybe it's just me, but I'm so used to cooking a full packer brisket that I just, I have our scores show it. I mean, it's all public information. Like our brisket is definitely our worst category by far. It's not even close. So, maybe making a change this weekend and just cooking the whole packer and seeing what happens. Who knows?
Yeah, I've got a brisket caddy, but I don't use it in competition. My results have been up and down. At the Banjo BQ, we were second, I think, in brisket that day, and I've had several top 10 finishes. But to start off the year, it's been a little bit off. But now I don't use the brisket caddy on the drums. I do separate, but I haven't been using the caddy. I might need to try it. But I know a lot of people do use it though.
They do. They absolutely do. And those that do well with it do well with it. For whatever reason, it's just really, kicked my tail. And it probably just comes down to, like everything else, just practicing more and using
Yep.
it more, that kind of thing. All right. So as far as, this journey into barbecue goes, right? So you started back in, I think you said 2016, 2017, is that right?
Yeah, doing a couple of years, not many.
Doing a couple, then you elevated your game. You got 2019 backyard team of the year.
Yeah.
Then obviously we all know what happened in 2020. So you probably took a little break like we all did.
Yeah.
2021 rolls around. So I guess where I'm going with all that is, what's next for you in your barbecue journey? And what I mean by that is, some folks decide that, hey, we're gonna vend a little bit, or we're gonna do some catering, or what's next in your as you progress? What do you see on the horizon in your journey?
That's a good question. I do a little catering on the side, but it's nothing full time. I mean, I've got a full time, demanding job. I've been in telecommunications, like I said, for 20 something years. So I would say just continuing to try to compete, 10 to 15 times a year and try to increase my schedule. Maybe win a little more and get some sponsors. I need to do a little better with social media. I may need a little bit of coaching on that. So that's the feedback I've had from the few sponsors that I've applied to is you need to up your social media game. So maybe we can talk about that. But I would say just continue competing. I don't have any plans to open a restaurant or anything of that nature. I just like competing, and I like the people that we meet while we're out there. We've made several good friends that we travel with to each competition, and just to continue that and have a good time at it.
Yeah, so I think you made another good point there talking about social media, and you're right. I think it's oftentimes neglected. For no, I don't think it's anyone's fault. I don't think it's done by design. I think it's just not something that is top of mind for whatever
Right.
reason. One of the things that I have learned is it really just comes down to consistency, and I think that so many times we worry about does this post look right? Does this video sound good? Do I look okay? And this is easier said than done, but I think the moment that we let go of caring about what other people think online is the moment really where you start to gain some traction, I think, with social media, putting yourself out there, which is difficult to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think in terms of a lot of folks ask me like, well, what should I do? Should I worry about the quality? And I'm not saying need to put out a bunch of, really bad posts. What I am saying is, don't stress so much about the quality of it, worry more about the consistency of it. And also the other thing I found too is like, if you want to be sponsored by, Royal Oak or pick any company, right? One of the things I've found that's helpful is start tagging them in every single post. Trust me, they're going to see it eventually. And eventually they're going to say, hey, you know what? This guy or girl, they're they're not even sponsored by us and they use our product and they're promoting. Right. I feel like if we focus on, giving first and then, or providing value first and then asking for some reciprocity, I think that's a better approach as opposed to just going in and saying, well, I got all these trophies and I've only got 50 followers on Facebook. So, but I will say this while we're camped out on social media, for our listeners, take some time and connect with Waylon. You can find him on Facebook and Instagram at Zips, ZIPS BBQ. That's both on Instagram and Facebook. And if any of our listeners, if you guys have feedback in terms of how to grow social media, hey, write into us, send us an email. Happy to hear everything. I am far from being a social media expert. I've made many more mistakes than I've had successes over the years. But I have found that consistency is really the big one there. So let's look at long term. So I know we talked about, kind of the immediate horizon for you, continuing to cook, maybe up in the number of competitions you're doing, but longer term. And really, this is more of a question about the industry as a whole. This is something that I chat a lot about. I think a lot about this, but how do we make sure that the sport as we know it continues to thrive, continues to grow, and continues to attract new teams? I think that's the other key there. What's your take on that? Right? There's a lot of opinions. Everybody's got one, but I'm curious to hear what your take on it is in terms of how do we as teams, as pitmasters, how do we ensure that we're engaging with the public, we are attracting new teams, and by default, we're gonna get bigger and bigger events because we have more eyeballs on us.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? How do we start changing the course of that?
That's a good one. I would say try to get more teams into the backyard division. I know a lot of the backyard competitions are going away. I think we need to encourage. It's an easier route to get started, right? And it doesn't scare people off as much as you come out to the event, and you see the 30 and 40-foot rigs out there and the giant smokers, and it's not that hard to get started if you really look at it. You can keep it basic and compete with the best of them. Second, I would say we need to have the youth involved. I think the Kids Queue is a good way to do a good start with that. Get your families involved in the events, to help get the younger generation started. And then as far as, getting the public involved, I said, the People's Choice and things of that nature. I saw your post earlier today about that. And I thought it was a great point, right? In order to get more people involved, you got to draw the public in and interact with them. So, I don't really have any grand ideas around it. It's just like you said, being consistent with it, allowing people to come in and ask questions and not, not during crunch time, right? Not between, at 12:30, you don't want people in your camp asking questions,
Right.
but other than that, you need to be open, to answering questions and interacting with the public.
Absolutely. And that's one reason why I love the Boss Hog Cook-Off in May, because it is very public friendly. You do get
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of engagement with the public. And to your point, I think if there was like, if there was just an announcement made by the organizer, hey, please refrain from, engaging with teams between 11:30 and 1:30. You know, after that, engage all you want, but
Have
those
at it.
two
Yeah.
hours, let's protect those 2 hours for obvious reasons. That's right in the middle of turn-in times.
Yeah.
But I think outside of that, it's, at the end of the day, I think people are going to remember how you made them feel more than
Yep.
anything else. And that's a really big thing. And I also think, it's, as I said in the post, I mean, is People's Choice really that much of a burden for us? I mean, is it really that difficult to cook two butts? I
No,
mean,
not if you know it ahead of time. I mean, you got plenty of time
right.
to do it.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, heck, I don't know if I would admit this, but you could even cook those two butts in a crock pot at home before you come, you
Oh
know.
yeah. Throw them on your pellet grill at home and cook them and bring them with you. So,
That's right. So at any rate, to your point, there is nobody has the magical answer. I don't think there's one specific answer that's going to solve everything. I just think it's a long-term play, and we've got to just, again, we as teams have to come together and present that, somewhat united front. I understand that
yeah.
not every team would be on board with those types of things, but at least I would hope the majority would be. Because if not, I think it's only a matter of time before eventually we just kind of fade away into, you know, not being relevant.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had I cook outside of my trailer. I do have a trailer, but I cook on drums and I cook outside and, not under a tent. But I've had more people come up to me and ask me about cooking on drums
Mhm.
than any of I've had gravity feed smokers and pellet grills before, and hardly anybody would ask you about them. But people are fascinated with the drum cookers. I don't know what the draw is, but I've answered more public questions about those than anything, and I'm happy to do it.
That's a great lead in to my next question, and that is, how did you decide on drums? What drew you to drums versus the gravity feed and the bullet?
Yeah, well, I was experimenting. I had a gravity feed, but when I moved up to pro, it wasn't quite big enough to do all the meats. Um, and I bought a bigger water cooker, and I just couldn't seem to find my stride with it. And I'd seen everybody cooking on the drums, and I bought one and just started tinkering with it and cooking and practicing on it, and really just found it suited my cooking style. You can be in the drum real quick, checking on your meat. You're not affecting the other four meats because you've got one cooker for each meat. The recovery time on it's good, and once I started cooking on the one, I just decided that I really loved it and wanted to move to all four meats cooking on it. And when I did, I think the Boss Hog last year was the first cook. I did all four meats on it. We were fourth overall, so that proved to me that it was the right path.
Absolutely right. And I think the drums themselves, they look unique. I think a big reason why people stop is because they
Yeah,
are different. They're not your typical pellet or gravity feed or stick burner. They're unique. And the hot and fast is I think a great way to cook food. I mean, I don't know where the origins of it begin. I mean, I've heard or read that it's kind of a Midwest Ozark
yeah,
thing. Brad and what's his name, Tim Shear, they kind of developed that. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I also think you get that fat dripping on those hot coals
oh
that
yeah,
creates a lot of that flavor um, profile. And I think it's of course there's downsides to everything. Well, I think one downside would be you've got four fires to manage versus
right.
one.
It
But
can.
the upside of course is, and to your point, you can check. You don't have to, you can check the chicken and not affect the pork or the ribs, or
Yeah,
check the brisket and whatever. I think that's helpful. Um, I also think there's just a lot of attention. It almost seems like there's this turf war with smokers. You ever get that feeling like people are,
Yeah.
there's like,
Stick
and
burner, you gotta be a stick burner guy, or they don't like gravity feed, you don't get enough smoke, or everybody's got an opinion, right?
everybody's got an opinion, but I think for our listeners, if you're taking this in and you're trying to decide, stick burner, gravity feed, drum, pellet, I think take a step back and think about your cooking style. If you
Yeah,
like to be hands-on in there and you're constantly on the move, maybe drums are your thing,
yeah,
because that's exactly what you're going to be doing. If you want to stay up all night, go ahead and get you a stick burner. They're great, but that's that's the downside
right.
to them is you got to sit there all night and put a log in there every 45
Yeah.
minutes or an hour.
I mean,
So
you just have to spend the time and learn your cooker, that's the thing. You can win on anything. There's people out there winning on pellet grills. Obviously, a lot of people winning on Jambos and Outlaws. It's because they know their cooker and they know their processes. So you just have to learn your cooker and find out which one suits you the best. And to me, that's the best route to go.
so being a solo cook, how do you manage all that? How do you manage 4 fires, 4 meats, timelines, everything else, and still engage with the public? Because I know that you do that on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, it can be tough. It's not as bad as it seems. The once you get those things dialed in, they tend to kind of run themselves. Once you get it running 300 degrees, and even when you're in and out of it, it tends to recover. I just have a strict timeline. Kurt, I know my timeline. Um, I kind of know when things need, in a general area where things are going to need to be wrapped. So I've got it all mapped out in a notebook. I don't have it up on the wall or anything, but I've got it here, and I've got it written down in a notebook that I reference while I'm cooking. But I know all that ahead of time, and I do have some help now. My wife does come out and help me, make boxes and run boxes and things of that nature. But as far as the cook, yeah, I'm pretty much 100% in charge of that.
Yeah, so it can be a lot, and I think when you're cooking on a drum, most of the drum cookers I've seen, you guys are starting your fires at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
Yeah,
So
I like the two big meats at 6, and they go on at 7.
there you go. So that allows you to hang out with the barbecue family the night before and get a decent night's rest.
Yeah,
Um, Now let's talk about that because I get a lot of questions about that. Where do we sleep? Well, for us, ours is just a cook trailer. We don't have there's no living quarters in there. So we usually either tent camp or if the weather's really bad, like it has been lately, uh, we we just get a hotel. How about you? Are you tent camping or do you have a place in that trailer to go to sleep?
yeah. My trailer is a converted car hauler.
Okay.
I actually bought it from a guy that was racing go karts out of it. So I redid the floors, and he already had cabinets and an air conditioner in there. And I built 2 fold down bunks over the wheel wells. So I'm able to sleep inside the camper and stay warm or cold, whatever. So it's nice to be able to get in and out of the elements. But yeah, I sleep in the camper.
That is very nice. One day we're working on that one day. Maybe we'll have one of those 35 or 40-foot rigs that we see out at
Exactly.
out at Sipping Swine. I don't know. We're working on that aspect of it. So, all right, as we kind of wind things down, one thing I wanted to touch on is, just some words of wisdom, right? From your perspective, really twofold. One, what sort of words of wisdom do you have for listeners that are saying, "Hey, I want to get into competition barbecue"? And two, what are some words of wisdom you have for the listener that says, "You know what? I don't care about competition barbecue. I just want to be able to, be the king of my cul-de-sac." What
Yeah.
advice would you have for those two folks?
I would say if you want to get into competition barbecue, don't let it scare you off looking at all the big rigs and everything. You can go in there with your cooker as long as you know your cooker and your timeline and be competitive. We're just regular guys out there doing it, right? We've just been doing it a little bit longer. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The more experienced guys are going to ask questions as long as you do it with the right tone and the right frame of mind, right? What was the second part?
Second part was, for those people that just say, "Hey, I don't want to be a competitor. I just want to be a
Yeah.
better backyard cook." What what words of wisdom would you have for those folks that just want to become better?
Kind of the same thing, but I mean, there's a lot of great online resources, man. I mean, when I started cooking, I didn't have a mentor or anything, but I started looking up competition barbecue online when we went into the whole backyard deal, and I found Malcolm Reed's website, and what a godsend that was. Right now, you've got him and Heath Riles out there, and all kind of folks on YouTube that are sharing recipes. I mean, listen to those guys if you really want to know. They've been around the block a long time, and they post some really great information, competition and backyard recipes all over their website. So,
That is so, so true. You think about 30 years ago, we didn't have YouTube.
no,
The internet was just in the beginning. It's in the infancy stages back then. So now you
yeah,
fast forward, you've got YouTube, you've got online classes, you've got in-person classes. I mean, there's a lot of free information out there. And my
oh,
advice
yeah.
go ahead.
I said, I was agreeing with you. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy the amount of information that's out there.
I think one of the best things I ever did was take an in-person class. And I
Yeah,
try to do it once or twice a year now. To me, at least for me and the way I learn, being in a classroom, I could focus a lot better. I didn't have the distraction of, the
right.
kids, the dogs, all that stuff. And then you actually get to, you get to see the techniques that are being used live. I think that's a great way to become a
Oh, yeah.
better cook, even if you don't care about competition.
Yeah, that would be an add-on to the guys wanting to get into competition. Like I said, don't be scared. Go ahead and get involved. Maybe a backyard to begin with. That would be my advice. But then, yeah, you're right. If you could afford to take a class, you're going to skip to the head of the line, right? You're gonna cut out a lot of time in learning that you would had to be learned by experience, right? We went several years without taking a class, and it's kind of like the school of hard knocks, right? You kind of figure out things along the way, and you ask a few questions here and there. But if you don't have a mentor that's out there on the trail, the quickest way to get there is going to be the online classes or taking a class in person from somebody that's already winning.
That's exactly right. And like you said, 99% of the people that you will run into at a barbecue competition are great folks.
Yep.
They will help you any way that they can, with one caveat. When you start beating them is likely when they stop helping you.
That's true.
So just keep that in mind. And again, for our listeners, chatting with Waylon Weatherford with Zips Barbecue. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram at Zips BBQ. Final question for you, Waylon, and it centers around some good at-home rub recipes, right? So, what's your favorite thing to cook at the house, just for you and your family?
I like to cook a lot of salmon, uh, smoked salmon, really, either on the pellet grill or on the drum. And
Nice.
I like to cook wings on the drum as well. And I'll be honest with you, Heath Riles simple citrus and honey rub on salmon is most excellent.
There you go. So, and actually, I'm glad you brought up salmon. We don't talk about fish a lot on the show, so I'm glad you brought that up. So,
Yeah,
you heard it right here. You hit it with some of that Heath Riles citrus. You said it was
simple
citrus,
citrus.
simple citrus.
Yeah,
Hit it with some of that. Now, are you cooking that on your drum or are you cooking that on a different
I cook it
cooker?
on my drum or pellet, depending on what kind of mood I'm in. Usually right at 300 degrees, and it only takes 25 minutes or so.
There you go. So, two very simple ingredients. You need a
Yep.
smoker and you need Heath Riles simple citrus. And sounds like you'll be able to produce a great piece of smoked salmon. So
Yep.
that's awesome. Hopefully that helps some of our listeners. I know I've never tried that rub. I'm gonna try it out because it does sound
It's
really,
really
really
good.
good.
Yep.
But Waylon, we appreciate you coming on the show, and we thank you for your time, sir.
Yes, sir, Kurt. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.